Have you ever felt like you've been searching for peace your entire life, only to realize it's been inside you all along? The journey home isn't about going back in time. It's about coming home to the child within you, the one who still remembers how to love, how to dream, how to feel alive. Have you ever had a night when everything around you was calm, but inside something felt stolen? The room was quiet, the clock ticked softly on the wall, yet your heart carried a strange heaviness. You sat by the window, maybe with a cup of tea in your hand, staring out at the empty street, asking yourself, why don't I feel at peace anymore? What's wrong with me? This is not just stress. It's not simply loneliness. It's as if some invisible force has quietly crept in and taken away your peace of mind, and you can't even explain how or why. I once met Robert, a man in his 70s. On the outside, his life looked complete. A loving family, a safe home, no financial worries. But every morning he woke up with a heaviness he couldn't shake. He told me, "It felt like I was being haunted, but not by ghosts, by something inside of me that I couldn't see." Have you ever felt that way? As if the person you are today is carrying a silent burden from long ago? Here's the truth. Often the one stealing our peace is not the world outside. It's not our age, our family, or even our circumstances. It's the child we once were, the inner child, still holding on to pain, fear, or wounds that were never healed. And no matter how old we become, that inner child whispers in the background, shaping how we feel, how we react, and how much peace we allow ourselves to have. But here's the good news. Just as the inner child can steal our peace, it can also be healed. And when that happens, life begins to feel lighter, freer, and more meaningful again. So in this video, we're going to explore how your inner child silently influences your emotions and relationships, why ignoring it only deepens the emptiness, and most importantly, how you can begin the journey of healing, step by gentle step. Stay with me, because by the end, you may discover that the peace you thought you lost was never gone. It was simply waiting for you to turn inward and listen. When people hear the phrase inner child, many imagine something abstract, maybe even a little new age. But in truth, the inner child is not a theory or a trend. It's a very real part of our psychology, carried within each of us, no matter how old we become. Think back for a moment to your childhood. Do you remember how sensitive you were? How a harsh word from a parent could sting for days? Or how a small act of kindness made you feel like the whole world was safe? In those early years, everything we experienced went deep into our hearts. We didn't have the defenses we do as adults. Every word, every touch, every silence, it all shaped who we believed ourselves to be. Psychologists say that between birth and around 7 years old, our brain is like soft clay. We are absorbing everything without filters. If a child grows up surrounded by love, encouragement, and safety, their inner child carries those feelings into adulthood. But if a child grows up with neglect, harsh criticism, or emotional distance, those wounds don't simply disappear when we get older. They remain, like echoes in the soul. That's what we call the inner child. It is the collection of all the feelings, memories, and beliefs we absorbed as children, both the joyful ones and the painful ones. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, described it as the child archetype, the eternal youth within us, holding both innocence and vulnerability. Modern therapists often say, your inner child is the part of you that still reacts like a child whenever old wounds are touched. For example, have you ever noticed how a small comment from someone, maybe your spouse or even your grown-up child, suddenly makes you feel worthless or unloved? Rationally, you know it's not true, but emotionally, it feels overwhelming. That's not the 60 or 70-year-old you reacting. That's the 5-year-old you, still waiting to be heard, still aching for comfort. And here's the key. The inner child doesn't vanish with age. We don't outgrow it. Instead, it lives quietly within us, shaping how we think, feel, and relate to others. Sometimes it helps us, giving us playfulness, curiosity, and joy. But other times, if that child is wounded, it steals our peace, whispering old fears. I'm not good enough. I'll be abandoned. No one really sees me. That's why so many people, even after a successful career, even with a loving family, still feel a strange emptiness or restlessness. On the outside, everything looks fine. But inside, the inner child is still carrying burdens that were never healed. I once met a woman in her late 60s who said, "Every time my husband raised his voice, even just a little, I froze. It wasn't him I was afraid of. It was my father's voice from decades ago echoing in my head." That's the power of the inner child. It doesn't care how many birthdays you've celebrated. It remembers and it reacts. But here's the hope. Once you begin to recognize and honor your inner child, healing becomes possible. Just like a real child, your inner child doesn't need perfection. It doesn't even need every wound to disappear. It only needs your attention, your compassion, and your willingness to listen. So in this journey, we'll go deeper into how to recognize when your inner child is crying out, the mistakes most people make when ignoring it, and most importantly, how to gently begin the healing. Because once that child within us feels safe again, something beautiful happens. The peace we thought was lost returns. Not because life is perfect, but because inside we are no longer divided. How do you know if your inner child is quietly at work within you, not as a friend, but as a thief, stealing away your peace? Many people feel unsettled inside without realizing why. They blame age, stress, or even just getting older. But very often, what they are experiencing is the voice of the child they once were, still asking to be heard. Here are some gentle but clear signs that your inner child may be calling out to you. 1. You feel an emptiness that nothing seems to fill. Outwardly, life looks fine. Your family is grown, your days are stable, yet inside, there's a hollow ache, as if something is missing. This emptiness is not laziness or weakness. It is often the cry of your inner child, longing for a deeper connection and meaning. 2. Old fears rise again in unexpected ways. Perhaps you find yourself anxious over small things or overly sensitive to being ignored. These reactions can seem out of proportion, but they often come from wounds in childhood, moments when you felt unseen or unloved. The child within you is whispering, "Don't forget me." 3. You struggle with relationships, even with those closest to you. Do you sometimes pull away or feel a wall between you and others? This may be the inner child protecting itself from hurt. Without realizing it, you may distance yourself because that young part of you still remembers the pain of rejection or criticism. 4. Memories return at surprising moments. A smell, a song, or even a phrase someone says suddenly brings back a flood of old feelings. Sometimes it's grief, sometimes anger, sometimes loneliness you thought was long gone. These are not random. They are invitations to finally listen to the parts of you that were silenced long ago. 5. You feel like a part of you is stuck. No matter how many achievements or roles you've had, there may be moments when you feel small, powerless, or even childlike in your reactions. This is the inner child showing itself, not to shame you, but to remind you that healing is still needed. The deeper truth. These signs are not here to scare you. They are here to remind you that what you're experiencing is not failure, and it's not the end. The inner child does not rise to destroy you. It rises because it longs for your attention, your care, your love. And here's the gift. Once you can name it, you no longer have to fight it. You can begin to walk hand in hand with your inner child, transforming fear into wisdom, loneliness into compassion, and emptiness into peace. You may be wondering, why is this happening now? I've lived a good life. I worked hard, cared for my family, did what was right. So why would old pain still show up? It's a question many people ask, and it's one of the most misunderstood. The truth is simple. Your inner child does not appear to punish you. It appears to invite you into deeper healing and freedom. A spiritual perspective. Think of a seed buried in the soil. From the outside, it looks like it has been swallowed by darkness. But only in that hidden place does the seed split open and bring forth new life. If you dig it up too soon, it never grows. The inner child is like that seed. It rises not to drag you backward, but to push you toward a new way of being. The feelings of emptiness or restlessness are not signs of failure. They are signs of growth, trying to break through. A psychological lens. Modern psychology offers a similar picture. Carl Jung often spoke about the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we try to deny. These shadows usually come from childhood experiences we never fully processed. When they rise in later life, it is not to destroy us, but to make us whole. The inner child shows up because the roles we've lived in, parent, provider, achiever, caretaker, no longer fit as tightly as they once did. Just like an old coat that tears at the seams, your soul is signaling, it's time for something bigger, freer, more authentic. What the inner child really wants. Here's the heart of it. The inner child doesn't want perfection from you. It doesn't demand that you erase the past or fix everything overnight. What it longs for is simple: to be acknowledged, to be heard without judgment, to be embraced with compassion. When your inner child rises with sadness, anger, or fear, it is not saying you are broken. It is saying, I am still here. Please, don't leave me behind. The invitation. So if you feel restless, anxious, or strangely empty, don't see it as weakness. See it as an invitation. Your inner child is knocking on the door of your heart, not to steal your peace, but to guide you back to it. In the next part, we'll explore how modern psychology and great teachers like Carl Jung and John Bradshaw help us understand this inner child more clearly, and why embracing it might be the key to the deepest peace you've ever known. Not long ago, I met a woman named Helen, 71 years old, who told me, for most of my life, I thought something was wrong with me. I always overreacted when people criticized me, and I could never explain why. But when I learned about the inner child, everything suddenly made sense. It wasn't me as a grown woman who was so sensitive. It was the little girl inside, still afraid of being scolded. This is exactly why modern psychology has placed such importance on the concept of the inner child. Great thinkers like Carl Jung and John Bradshaw showed us that our younger selves never truly disappear. Instead, they live inside us, shaping how we react, how we love, and how we see ourselves. Carl Jung and the shadow. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we try to bury. Many of those shadows come from childhood, the times we were shamed, ignored, or told to be quiet. Jung taught that real growth doesn't happen by pretending those parts don't exist. Growth comes when we bring the shadow into the light. He said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, by meeting our inner child with honesty, we transform the very wounds that once controlled us. John Bradshaw and the Wounded Child. Years later, John Bradshaw, a counselor, writer, and teacher, made this idea accessible to everyday people. He called it the wounded inner child. Bradshaw explained that many of our struggles as adults, perfectionism, anger, fear of intimacy, even addiction, can be traced back to that wounded child within. And healing doesn't mean getting rid of it. Healing means turning toward it with love, giving it what it never received: safety, kindness, and acceptance. John Bradshaw and the Wounded Child. Years later, John Bradshaw, a counselor, writer, and teacher, made this idea accessible to everyday people. He called it the wounded inner child. Bradshaw explained that many of our struggles as adults, perfectionism, anger, fear of intimacy, even addiction, can be traced back to that wounded child within. And healing doesn't mean getting rid of it. Healing means turning toward it with love, giving it what it never received: safety, kindness, and acceptance. The lesson for us today. For those of us in the second half of life, these insights carry a special power. They remind us that healing is not only possible, it's never too late. When Helen finally recognized her inner child, she said something beautiful. "I realized I wasn't broken at all. I was just carrying a little girl who had been waiting for me all these years. And when I finally embraced her, I felt peace for the first time." That is the heart of Jung and Bradshaw's teaching. The inner child is not your enemy. It is your pathway to wholeness. In the next part, we'll explore practical steps you can take to begin healing your inner child. Gentle practices that anyone can start, no matter your age or stage in life. I once spoke with Richard, a 74-year-old retired teacher. He told me, "For years, I thought healing meant erasing my past. I wanted to forget the pain and just move on. But the truth is, my past was still alive inside me. It wasn't until I turned toward that little boy within me, the one who felt scared and unwanted, that my peace finally began to return." Healing the inner child is not about perfection, nor about fixing everything overnight. It is about small, gentle steps that slowly bring light into the places that once felt dark. Here are some practices that have helped many people on this journey. 1. Acceptance. Stop fighting the child within. Instead of asking, "Why am I still like this?" try asking, "What is this part of me asking for?" Your inner child doesn't need judgment. It needs patience. Just as you would sit quietly with a frightened child, you can sit quietly with your own emotions. 2. Listening. Give your inner child a voice. When difficult feelings arise, fear, shame, sadness, don't push them away. Write them down. Speak them out loud. Some people even write letters to their inner child, saying, "I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you now." This simple act of listening begins to heal what silence once wounded. 3. Safe solitude. Finding comfort in quiet moments. Solitude is different from isolation. Solitude is a safe space where you learn to enjoy your own company. One woman told me she spends 10 minutes every morning sitting by her garden window with tea, simply breathing. "At first it felt empty," she said, "but now it feels like I'm finally keeping myself company." 4. Community. Share your journey with others. Healing is deeply personal, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Sharing with a trusted friend, a support group, or even writing in the comments of a video can remind you, you are not alone. When we speak our truth in a safe space, the weight lessens. 5. Creativity. Let your soul express itself. Painting, writing, gardening, cooking, or even humming a tune. These are not small acts. They are ways your inner child comes alive again. Creativity is less about the result and more about giving voice to what was once silent. The gentle reminder. Healing your inner child is not about becoming fearless or flawless. It is about learning to walk hand in hand with the younger you who still lives inside. As Richard told me, when I finally stopped running from that little boy and instead began to love him, I realized he wasn't holding me back. He was leading me forward. In the next part, we'll explore the transformation that happens when your inner child no longer feels like a burden, but becomes one of your greatest sources of strength. I once heard a story about Margaret, a 71-year-old grandmother from Ohio. For much of her life, she carried deep feelings of unworthiness. As a child, she was often told to be quiet or stop being so sensitive. Those words buried themselves inside her heart, and for decades she believed her tenderness was a weakness. But when Margaret began her journey of healing her inner child, something unexpected happened. She didn't just release her pain, she rediscovered her gift. The same sensitivity that once made her feel too much became the very source of her compassion. Today, she's the one her grandchildren run to when they need comfort. She listens without judgment, and they know they are safe with her. Her story reminds us of this simple truth. The parts of ourselves we once tried to hide are often the very parts that hold our greatest strength. We can trust like. What transformation looks like when your inner child feels heard and loved. It stops crying out in pain and begins to shine. The fear that once drained your peace can transform into courage. The sadness that once weighed you down can deepen your empathy for others. Carl Jung once said, "The gold is in the dark." What he meant is that the treasures of our soul are often hidden in the very places we least want to look, from burden to gift. Think of it this way. The little boy who was once told he wasn't good enough may grow into a man who encourages others to believe in themselves. The little girl who once felt invisible may grow into a woman who sees others more clearly than anyone else. The child who once carried shame may become the adult who helps others feel whole. Living from wholeness transformation doesn't mean your inner child disappears. It means that instead of running your life from the shadows, it now walks beside you as a trusted friend. The same child that once felt like a burden now becomes a wellspring of wisdom, creativity, and love. One man in his late 60s told me, "I used to resent the wounds of my childhood, but now I see they gave me eyes to notice suffering in others. Without them, I wouldn't know how to love this deeply." The lesson. The journey through the inner child is not about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming it, turning old wounds into sources of compassion, old fears into courage, and old silence into a voice that brings healing not only to you but to others. Because when your inner child is embraced, you don't just find peace, you find power, the kind of quiet, authentic strength that radiates far beyond you. In the next part, we'll hear real-life stories of people who walked this path of healing, stories that will inspire us to see how the inner child, once healed, can transform lives in the most beautiful ways. Stories have a way of touching our hearts in ways theory never can. So let me share with you a few real journeys of people who discovered what happens when we stop running from the inner child and instead begin to love it. Margaret's story. From silence to compassion. Margaret, a grandmother in her 70s, once carried the heavy memory of being told children should be seen and not heard. For most of her life, she stayed quiet in rooms where she longed to speak. When she began inner child work, she slowly gave that little girl inside her permission to speak again. She started journaling, then sharing her reflections with her church group. To her surprise, people leaned in, deeply moved by her words. "After so many years of silence," she said, "I discovered my voice was never gone. It was simply waiting to be welcomed." Robert's story. From shame to service. Robert, age 68, grew up in a home where mistakes were punished harshly. Even as an adult, he carried the belief that he was never good enough. It showed up in his work, in his marriage, and even in retirement, where he felt useless without achievements to prove his worth. Through counseling and gentle reflection, Robert realized that his inner child wasn't trying to shame him. It was simply longing to be told, "You are loved just as you are." Today, Robert volunteers at a local community center, mentoring boys who don't have father figures. "Every time I tell them they are enough," he says, "I'm also telling that little boy inside me the same thing." Eleanor's story. From grief to creativity. Eleanor lost her husband after 45 years of marriage. The grief was overwhelming, but beneath the sorrow, she felt an even deeper emptiness. The lonely child inside her who had always longed for safety. Instead of ignoring the pain, Eleanor began painting, something she hadn't done since childhood. Each brushstroke became a conversation with the little girl who once dreamed of colors and beauty. Years later, Eleanor holds small art gatherings for widows in her town. Healing my inner child gave me back not only my peace, she says, but also my joy. The lesson from these stories. Each of these journeys shows us something profound. Healing the inner child is not about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were waiting all along. Your voice, your worth, your creativity, your love. The process isn't quick, and it isn't always easy. But as these stories remind us, it's never too late. At 60, 70, or even 80 years old, the inner child still waits patiently for one thing, your embrace. As we arrive at the end of this journey, I want to leave you with one simple truth. The inner child inside you is not your enemy. It is not here to torment you. It is simply the part of you that has been waiting patiently for years to be seen, to be loved, and to be brought home. Yes, there will be moments of discomfort. Yes, the memories may sting. But within those tender places lies the doorway to something so much greater. Peace, freedom, and a heart that finally feels whole. Think of it this way. Healing the inner child is not about fixing what is broken. It's about uncovering what was always good, always beautiful, always worthy deep inside of you. And remember this, it is never too late. Whether you are 55, 65, or 85, your inner child is still alive and still longing for your embrace. A message for you. If you are listening right now and feel a whisper in your heart saying, "This is me, I think my inner child is still hurting," please know, you are not alone. Millions of others have walked this very same path, and many have found their greatest healing later in life. Your story matters, your voice matters, and your inner child is waiting to remind you that you matter too. A gentle invitation. If this message has touched your heart, I invite you to take one small step today. Maybe write a letter to your inner child. Maybe sit quietly with a photo of your younger self and whisper, "I see you. I love you. You are safe now." And if you feel comfortable, share your reflections in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs tonight. And of course, if this video has brought you comfort or clarity, I warmly invite you to subscribe and join our community. This is a circle of wisdom, healing, and authenticity. A space where no soul has to walk this path alone. One last whisper for your heart. Before we part, place your hand gently over your heart. Take a deep breath and softly say to yourself, "I am not broken, I am whole. My inner child is safe and I am walking into the light of my true self." And always remember, the dawn is waiting, even after the longest night.